Anger flares against the US in Afghanistan. These protesters are lashing out over the massacre of 16 civilians last weekend. A massacre allegedly committed by a US soldier. Well, those killings have taken relations between the US and Afghanistan to a new low and escalated calls for a US troop withdrawal. US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta was in Afghanistan this past week, struggling to contain the fallout. Afghan President Hamid Karzai telling Panetta that American troops should pull out of outposts in Afghan villages and return to their main bases. He's also pushing for international forces to hand over security control of the country to the Afghan military by 2013, next year, instead of 2014. But Panetta says the massacre won't sideline the mission.
We will not allow individual incidents to undermine our resolve to that mission and to sticking to the strategy that we've put in place.
Well, a new poll shows that 40% of Americans say the massacre had weakened their support for the war, while 61% of Americans surveyed by Reuters Ipsos said the remaining US troops should be brought home immediately. So is it time for the US troops to exit Afghanistan or do so a little faster than planned? We're going to look at both sides of this. Ahmed Majidia believes that the US should stay the course. He is a senior research associate at the American Enterprise Institute. Malou Innocent is on the other side of the debate, a foreign policy analyst with the Cato Institute. Malou, let's start with you. What's your view on this? There's a lot of pressure for this to be accelerated 10 years into this war.
Well, I think their shooting really reaffirmed my long-held position that we cannot achieve our goals. Despite tripling the number of troops and investing more time, more energy, and more resources into this mission, we've seen that the fragile and reversible security gains that we have achieved can easily unravel in the blink of an eye. I think this volatile situation really calls into question the wisdom of simply crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. And I think we really must keep in mind that the mission and the war has really been deteriorating for the past several years. Only recently have these events really shined a harsh light on the tactics and operations in the country. Ahmed,
what's your view? I mean, by all accounts, what was happening in those villages was having some modicum of success. But in the broader picture, in a military sense, this is never going to be won on the battlefield.
I agree with Malou that the recent shootings of 16 civilians in Afghanistan and also the violence which started after the burning of Quran last month have had some setbacks to the military mission in Afghanistan. But these are isolated incidents, and we should not let these isolated incidents to derail the broader strategy in Afghanistan, and that is to create sufficient stability in the country, which will prevent the return of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda to the country.
But how ready is the Afghan military in that regard anyway? I mean, you're talking about getting an army up and running to take over security, but even paying for that army is something Afghanistan couldn't do on its own.
There has been remarkable progress in strengthening, training and equipping the Afghan National Army and also the Afghan National Police over the past 2 years. We have to bear in mind that the real effort to train the Afghan National Army only started in November 2009, and since then there has been an addition of 130,000 Afghan policemen and soldiers, and also the Afghan forces have improved in quality as well. Right now they are operating nearly 40% of all the conventional and special operations forces, and also have assumed security responsibilities for 50% of the Afghan population.
Malou, what do you think when you look at the big picture? Do you think that, I mean, a lot of people say that this is a futile exercise to begin with, but to leave now before things become a little bit more solidified, if you like, would be a huge mistake?
I think we've really lost track of why we went into Afghanistan in the first place. We must understand that Al-Qaeda poses a very manageable security problem for the United States. And to maintain an open-ended nation-building presence in Afghanistan, it's unnecessary, it's unsustainable, and in many respects it's counterproductive. I think we must also sort of step back and understand that we have no strategy for resolving Afghanistan's internal politics. We have no strategy for resolving the security dilemma between India and Pakistan and their proxy war in Afghanistan. And if we cannot bring about a better peace, which is the point of all wars, then it's time that we begin to cut our losses and draw down the number of troops and then eventually cut our forces completely from this region.
When we talk about stabilizing, Malou, when we talk about stabilizing the country politically, let alone militarily, I mean, how much of Afghanistan does Hamid Karzai actually run anyway? I mean, this is still a very tribal, a very, very big country. It's not a very central... The government, in terms of running it through central government, it's not that type of place, really, is it?
All right. I think there's a bit of a problem in terms of resolving Afghanistan's internal and external politics. But I think in the months and years ahead, we might see an increasing level of distrust that we've seen over the past several years between the Afghan security forces and their American counterparts. We may also see an increase in the civilian casualties unless tactics and operations change. We must remember that 2011 was the 5th straight year in which civilian casualties rose. And we might also see, just lastly, an increase in the ambushes and attacks on supply lines, which are very tenuous and they snake through very hostile territory. The
U.S. President said he's going to be holding course for the moment anyway, but certainly a very fluid situation, as they like to say in Washington. I want to thank our guests, Ahmed Majidia and Malou Innocent. Thanks so much.
Thank you.